Meghan is in California right now, and you're here, and there's articles left and right about what is happening with these two. So is that a good thing for you in a way that there's so much interest in you?
No, there's definitely not a good thing. Apparently we've bought or moved house maybe 10, 12 times. We've apparently divorced maybe 10, 12 times as well. So it's just like, what?
There was a moment not too long ago when Meghan Markle and Prince Harry weren't just royals, they were revolutionaries. The world watched spellbound. This once golden couple flipped the monarchy on its head and dared to dream beyond the gilded gates of Buckingham Palace. They were branded the modern-day rebels, royal renegades who turned their backs on centuries of tradition, silken protocol, and the crushing weight of inherited duty. In a stunning break from the crown, they didn't just step down, they stepped out hand in hand into the blinding glare of Hollywood. Where others bowed in silence, they spoke up. Where others followed script, they rewrote the narrative. For a brief moment it felt like history was shifting. Glove-Redford and truth had triumphed over royal rigidity. Their departure in 2020 wasn't merely newsworthy, it was seismic. A senior royal voluntarily abandoning the palace life was virtually unheard of in modern times. It wasn't just about leaving. It was about confronting an institution that had long been immune to public reckoning. Meghan and Harry chose to forge their own path, not as royalty but as individuals, as humans, as voices in a world that too often silences dissent, and at first the world cheered. From primetime interviews that set ratings records to a media blitz that included podcasts, streaming specials, and cover stories, they were everywhere. They spoke of injustice, of personal trauma, of feeling unsupported and unseen. For millions, they became a symbol of courage, a couple refusing to be crushed under the weight of royal expectation. Their Netflix deal, worth a jaw-dropping $100 million, seemed like the crowning jewel of their post-royal reinvention. Archewell Productions was born promising bold compassion and transformative storytelling. The streaming giant had placed its bet on the Sussex shipping. They would deliver not just content but cultural relevance. And for a while it worked. Meghan and Harry were no longer just ex-royals. They were content creators, advocate builders. They were the faces of a new kind of fame, one rooted in vulnerability, activism, global appeal. Netflix was all in. Documentary as ain't it. Children's shows and stories spotlighting justice and resilience. The possibilities felt infinite. The world waited eagerly for each new release. But fast forward for years and the narrative is no longer one of triumphs. One of slow-motion collapse. What once looked like a media empire now appears to be crumbling. The $100 million Netflix partnership, once hailed as visionary, has now officially imploded. The silence from Archewell is deafening. Promised content never materialized. Plans fizzled, momentum stalled. And inside the once charismatic fairy tale, something darker is reportedly unfolding. Multiple sources close to the couple have painted a bleak picture, not just of a faltering professional brand but of a personal relationship under strain. Rumors are swirling that Meghan and Harry, who once symbolized unity in defiance, are drifting apart. What began as a powerful love story that defied royal convention is now being whispered about in the tabloids as a potential split. The narrative that once enchanted the globe is unraveling thread by thread. Today many are asking, was it worth it? Did their bid for freedom cost them more than they imagined? Meghan and Harry's icons of a progressivist monarchist future, no risk being remembered. Not for the rules they broke but for the empire they couldn't hold together. A dream once bursting with possibility now lingers in the shadow of disappointment. And to truly understand how this all began to fall apart, we need to re-window that pivotal moment in 2020. When they made the choice that changed everything, because the seeds of today's unraveling weren't planted overnight, they've been growing in plain sight, nurtured by ambition, pressure, and the unforgiving spotlight of public life. The initial excitement surrounding Meghan and Harry's post-royal ventures reached its peak with the release of their debut docuseries. It made headlines across the globe, generating intense buzz and reigniting public curiosity. For a moment it seemed their storytelling venture might actually live up to the hype. Viewers were promised an unfiltered glimpse into the lives of two people who had escaped the constraints of royalty to embrace a new era of truth and transparency. The docuseries sparked conversation, but it couldn't sustain momentum, and that flicker of success quickly began to fade. After the initial spotlight dimmed, a troubling silence followed. One by one, highly publicized follow-up projects quietly disappeared into the abyss. The animated children's series Pearl*, which had been heralded as a feminist reimagining of influential women through the eyes of a young girl, was abruptly canceled before it ever aired. No major announcement, no explanation, just a quiet strategic erasure. Other scripted content that had been teased during their Netflix partnership never moved beyond development. Promising concepts stalled stuck in what Hollywood insiders call development hell, a creative purgatory, from which few projects ever return. And then came the final blow. Multiple reports confirmed what had long been whispered in industry circles: Netflix had officially pulled the plug. The streaming giant severed its remaining contractual obligations, with Archewell Productions faithfully closing the chapter on one of its most high-profile and ultimately most disappointing Zibri partnerships. The $100 million dream had flatlined. Netflix executives didn't mince words when reflecting on the decision. According to insiders, the mood wasn't angry, it was resigned. Another offered a far harsher assessment. They brought headlines in it. He, high-ranking executive, reportedly called the entire endeavor a branding experiment that RT audiences didn't see authenticity, they saw PR. For Meghan and Harry, those words sting deeply. Their brand had always been built around emotional candor, vulnerability, truth. They had positioned themselves not as celebrities but as messengers, advocates, survivors of a broken system, and yet the streaming audience, ever skeptical and increasingly discerning, felt something else: artifice, a rehearsed narrative. The feeling that the couple was trying to manufacture resonance rather than earn it. But the unraveling of their professional dreams is only part of this increasingly tragic tale. Because behind the polished PR and public appearances, something far more fragile is reportedly breaking down their marriage. While once united in vision and fiercely protective of one another, Meghan and Harry are now said to be emotionally distant, not just growing apart but living separate lives under the same roof. Multiple sources close to the couple have suggested that the emotional connection that once bonded them so tightly through scandal-scrution seismic life changes has begun to fray. Meghan, the strategist, is reportedly laser-focused on rebooting her solo career. She's been seen reconnecting with power players in the fashion world, media elite, and even dipping her toes into political circles. Her sights are set high, perhaps even higher than before. Harry, in contrast, is said to be adrift, far from the familiarity of the UK, and struggling to find meaning in the performative ecosystem of California celebrity life. Appears increasingly isolated. Where Meghan is charging ahead with purpose, Harry seems lost in the noise. A former aides peeking anonymously painted a heartbreaking picture. Harry looks like a man caught between two worlds, one he left, and the one he never truly fit into. That single statement encapsulates so much. Because for all of Harry's efforts to define himself outside the royal mold, he remains in limbo. A prince without a Palestine, no, perhaps a husband without an anchor. Then came the most explosive headline. Yet, Meghan, according to insider reports, met with divorce attorneys in Los Angeles. Her representatives have attempted to soften the narrative, insisting the meetings were routine and not indicative of any current decision. But in the high-stakes world of public perception, optics matter, and these optics speak volumes. For a couple whose brand was built on unity, partnership, shared diffy on the symbolism of legal consultation, sev if preliminary is undeniably damaging. Stack that on top of failing media ventures, public disillusionment, and conflicting personal ambitions, and a chilling picture begins to emerge. What once looked like a modern fairy tale, a prince and his beloved rewriting their destiny, is starting to resemble something far more familiar in Hollywood: a spectacular implosion. From power couple to potential tabloid cautionary tale, their story now seems to pivot not around hope and reinvention but disconnection and collapse. And in this atmosphere of uncertainty, I can't help but wonder, did they push too hard too fast? Did the weight of the narrative they created become too heavy to bear? Because what was once a love story told with the world's eyes upon them is now increasingly quiet unraveling, playing out behind closed doors and perhaps soon in courtrooms. 3. As Meghan and Harry's world appears to teeter on the edge of the response here, lack thereof from the British royal family has been nothing short of strategic. King Charles III and Prince William, two most prominent figures of the modern monarchy, have remained entirely silent. No press releases, no carefully worded statements, no palace leaks, at least none overt enough to draw attention. To the public, the crown is keeping calm and carrying on. But behind those ancient palace walls, royal insiders suggest a different story. One of watchful patience, a quiet confidence, and perhaps calculated preparation. Multiple palace sources have hinted that the monarchy is not just passively observing the Sussexes unraveling. They are anticipating outcomes. They know the tides of public opinion. They understand that image and Meghan legacy are everything. And some within those inner royal circles reportedly believe that Prince Harry may and dare turn not just as a visitor or estranged relative, a bit in a more permanent symbolic, perhaps even operational role. Such a possibility, while still speculative, would represent a tectonic shift in the royal dynamic. Rumors persistent though officially unconfirmed claim that Harry has quietly reconnected with former palace advisors. That conversation Javre delicate taken place, that he has voiced a sense of exhaustion, regret, a deep and growing dissatisfaction with the life he built after stepping away from the firm. No longer the bold media-savvy dissenter who once sat across from Oprah and declared his independence with unwavering clarity. Harry is now said to be subdued, reflective, even nostalgic. It's not that a formal return to the royal fold is imminent. The emotional and institutional wounds from his exit from the very public accusations hurled at his family are in deep. Trust in a monarchy built on legacy and discretion is not easily restored. But the very idea that such a return is even being discussed in hushed tones marks a significant development for the first time since Megxit. The narrative is no longer just about what Harry walked away from, it's about whether he might be circling back. Meanwhile, Meghan is charting a very different course, where Harry seems caught in the gravitational pull of his past. Meghan is barreling full speed into her future. Her public relations apparatus is in high gear. Behind closed doors, her team has reportedly enlisted the help of elite crisis management professional experts in reshaping celebrity personas and salvaging public image after controversy. The goal is clear: reboot, repose, and reassert. Although the Netflix chapter has come to an unceremonious end, Meghan is far from finished. Sources say she's laying the groundwork for a comprehensive solo resurgence. She's already initiating new conversations with major fashion houses in collaborations and brand ambassadorships. There's talk of another memoir on that would center her personal journey, this time untethered from the royal narrative. Lifestyle branding, wellness ventures, even political consulting. These are no longer just rumors, but active items on the Meghan Markle rebranding roadmap. Some say she's preparing to step into a spotlight entirely her own, no longer defined by her marriage and loss or the crown she never wore. For Meghan, this is not a retreat, it's a recalibration. She appears poised to reposition herself not just as a public figure but as a cultural force. A woman with influence and ambition reimagined through a post-Harry lens. And yet, despite the strategic planning and behind-the-scenes maneuvering, public reaction has been anything but forgiving. Social media, the same ecosystem that once cheered her as a breath of fresh air in a musty old monarchy, is now sharply divided. For every defender who applauds her independence and resilience, there are others who accuse her of opportunism, emotional manipulation, or simply trying too hard to stay relevant. Has the public grown weary of the Sussex saga? Or has the narrative simply shifted out of their control? In the early days they shaped the story. Now it seems the story is shaping them. What's painfully evident in all this is the divergence and not just of paths but of personas. Harry increasingly portrayed as lost and conflicted. Meghan relentlessly determined to rise even if it means rising alone. And the royal family watching from afar, perhaps waiting for the moment when silence speaks louder than any statement ever could. As Meghan and Harry's public image continues to unravel, criticism has intensified and nowhere more viciously than on social media, where opinion has become both currency and weapon. A growing chorus of detractors has accused Meghan of orchestrating a meticulously calculated rise to fame, leveraging her royal title for personal gain, and abandoning every rung on the ladder once it had served its purpose. She left the palace, she left her family, now she's leaving the man who gave up everything for her. Read one viral post, harsh but emblematic of a sentiment that is rapidly gaining traction in the court of public opinion. To her critics, Meghan represents the ultimate betrayal not just of tradition but of loyalty. They argue that she uprooted Prince Harry from his heritage, distanced him from his family, lulled him into a world that chewed up their shared identity, and is now walking away once again, this time from the man who publicly burned bridges for her. These accusations are emotional and often devoid of nuance, but they are powerful in how widely and quickly they spread, and yet the backlash tells only half the story. Just as fierce as the criticism is the defense, Meghan's supporters are unwavering in their conviction that she has been vilified from the beginning. They point to a pattern of misogynistic and overt racism and the unrelenting pressure placed on women, especially women of color, who dare to challenge the status quo. They remind the public that Meghan's every move has been scrutinized with a microscope not applied to any male royal nor even to most white royals. She's surviving in a system that was never designed to support her, one viral tweet declared. For these defenders, Meghan is not a manipulator, she's a survivor. What's more likely, however, is that the truth lies somewhere between the extremes. Meghan Markle is neither the villain painted by tabloids nor the flawless heroine idolized by fans. She is a woman navigating an impossible intersection of race, femero, and media that has no precedent and no rulebook. And in that space of contradiction in the most well-intentioned decisions can be misunderstood, misrepresented. The same applies to Harry, who has gone from being admired for his bravery to being pitied as a man lost in someone else's vision. But perhaps the most shocking aspect of the saga is not the marriage speculation, nor the PR backlash, it's the sheer collapse of what once felt untouchable. This is a couple who once redefined modern celebrity were embraced by millions as a symbol of freedom from antiquated power structures, that they now find themselves teetering on the edge of both personal and brand disintegration. Feels like watching a cultural experiment crash in real time. And then there's the matter of the Netflix deal itself. What does its failure truly signify? Beyond the headlines and contract figures, it reflects something deeper about how modern audiences consume celebrity. In the age of digital saturation and hyper-curated perfection, viewers are increasingly allergic to anything that feels manufactured. They don't want glossy narratives, they want honesty. They crave stories rooted in struggle and emotional depth. Spectacle alone isn't enough. And that perhaps is where Meghan and Harry missed the mark. For all the media output, for all the confessions and interviews and heavily produced content, there was always a sense of distance. A narrative that seemed curated rather than lived. Emotional truth was promised, but emotional resonance was often lacking. And in a world where audiences can sniff out inauthenticity in seconds, Netflix platform driven by data, and Roy simply moved on. The streaming giant didn't make the decision based on tabloid drama or royal gossip. It made it based on numbers, viewership and Gagantian feedback. And what those numbers said quite bluntly is that Meghan and Harry may have built a brand that generated headlines but not loyalty. Which brings us to the most fragile part of this unfolding story. What happens if the divorce rumors are real? If Meghan and Harry part ways it? Just as business partners but as spouses, the consequences would be massive, emotionally, financially, culturally. There would be custody negotiations, delicate and potentially public, legal battles over assets, content, rights, intellectual property. Every detail of their separation would be dissected on talk shows, tabloid covers and Twitter threads. Brands they've built together would have to be redefined or dismantled. Archewell, their philanthropic venture, could face an identity crisis. Their joint public identity, so heavily marketed as a united front, would fracture. But perhaps most impactful would be the symbolic collapse. For years they have been viewed not just as a couple, but as a conceptual redefinition of what it means to be royal, modern and in love. If that concept fails, it may be seen as proof that the experiment itself was doomed from the start. That love and rebellion in this case were not enough, and yet, the possibility remains that they might hold on, that despite the remorse, brand failures and the emotional fatigue, Meghan and Harry may still choose to weather the storm together, to retreat from the spotlight, to rebuild not for the world but for themselves. Because while their public image has taken blow after blow, no one outside their inner circle truly knows what remains at the core of their relationship. Reinvention has always been Meghan and Harry's greatest strength and their greatest gamble. In 2020, they rewrote the rulebook on royalty, defying centuries of tradition. With a single seismic decision, they didn't just step away from the monarchy. They redefined what it meant to have power outside of the crown, and for a time their pivot was thrilling, unprecedented, even revolutionary. Now as their empire wobbles under the weight of failed promises and public fatigue, question looms. Can they do it again? Rebrand, reinvent, rewrite the narrative. It's not impossible. History is filled with public figures who fell from grace, only to rise again stronger, more compelling than before. But this time the odds are stacked high against them. The stakes are no longer just reputational or financial, they're existential. Their very identity as a power couple's modern icons of love and rebellion hangs in the balance. Once hailed as the future of royal storytelling, Meghan and Harry now stand on fragile ground. Their fan base is fractured, their critics louder than ever, their brand so carefully curated is showing cracks. And the world, which once leaned in with admiration, watches with a mix of skepticism, exhaustion, and morbid fascination. This is more than just the potential end of a media partnership or a high-profile marriage, it's the unraveling of a cultural moment. Because at their peak, Meghan and Harry represented something larger than themselves. They were avatars of disruption. In a world of tradition, symbols of love, breaking barriers, figures who gave voice to the silent and challenged the untouchable. That narrative resonated across continents, inspiring countless people to rethink institutions, challenge norms and believe in reinvention. But narratives are fragile things. And in today's world where public trust is fickle and virality can turn into backlash overnight, maintaining a story is sometimes harder than creating one. Whether this is the end of the Sussex era or just another dramatic twist in their unpredictable journey depends entirely on what they choose to do next. Will they retreat from the noise or calibrate their values and emerge with a humbler, more authentic voice? Or will they double down on spectacular trying to reclaim relevance through image rather than substance? There are only two directions from a crossroads: forward into something newer, back into what was left behind. The world is watching closely: the media, the monarchy, the fans, the critics. Everyone wants to know what comes next, not just because it's entertainment, but because it says something about the age we live in, about fame, about power, about the cost of walking away from a kingdom in search of something more real. So what do you think? Is this the final chapter of Meghan and Harry's power couple legacy, or simply a low point in a long and complex narrative still being written? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Hit like, share this story with someone following the saga, subscribe to stay updated. Because this isn't just a royal drama, it's a modern myth unraveling before our eyes. And we'll be hair tracking every turn, every twist, and every truth that finally comes to light.